relationship and your mental health and your relationship as you care for your mom is recognizing and allowing her to be, your relationship to be at that moment mom.
Mm-hmm. Well, she kind of had to be, didn't she?
Yeah. So look, I think it's but look at how we can easily discount people and their ability because of a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. That is a good point. Yeah, just because I needed my mama.
You needed your mama.
I didn't know it. I wasn't conscious of it, but I did need her to calm me down and tell me, you need to sit down and breathe. You need to calm down. So that was pretty cool.
Yes, and then the other beauty of this, because of the disease, she has no memory.
Yeah.
Like, you talk about, you have to, and even for me, have to deal with the emotional after effects, even driving here today. Mm-hmm. And as I go through the city, just, you know, even being grateful that a half a mile difference could have changed my whole life, right? It's changed my life anyway, yeah. But like a half a mile,
or even something like 10 feet.
Yeah. And like if I had been, and I was dry as I was out before the storm, the path I came to the location I was in, that path was destroyed. So like a few 15 minutes earlier or later, I was in that path. So you just kind of think about how grateful you are and how a few minutes can change your life. So for her not to have to remember the effects of that day.
Yeah, because I definitely, and you talked about this too, I was jittery. After a tornado, for those who've experienced it, the neighborhood gets descended upon by trucks, noise, chainsaws. And so I was just jumping out of my skin. Now, hours later, when people were doing things, and I thought, I heard somebody say something about insurance. I was like, well, that's something I can do. And I found the number right away, called my agent, told him what happened. He started a claim that night. So this tornado hit at 2:30. I was doing business by 5. There were tree service people already here. I wanted that one tree off the roof. Until someone could tell me we were safe, that thing was, I wanted it off. Oh, yeah. The other 2 were fine, but that sucker needed to go. So they got it off the roof and tarped with a tarp that I had. But by then, God had already provided a contractor type man that my agent had recommended. He was already dealing with a house next door, basically, a neighborhood next door that got hit so bad. To get here to us by at least 7 o'clock, he had to crawl over trees and couldn't park near, and he and this guy came and they properly tarped the roof to what they knew how to do. So I felt pretty good. So I just, the neighbors were great. Everything was, but man, I was worn out. Now, we're talking about routine and changes. So the last 3.5 weeks. Yeah.
Your routine is most definitely off.
Some similarities that I could do without any weirdness or questions was, we've lived together long enough that we've experienced ice storms, we've experienced lots of power outages. So the power was out. This is not, it's like, poo. I was like, well, we're going to need to sleep together. So we're going to go sleep in your room since we have damage in mine. And that's not unusual to her, because anytime there was any kind of power outage, we always felt safe if we were in the same room. And so that was not unusual. We left the door open. She was conscious enough to know that something dramatic had happened still. Certainly would not have verbalized a tornado. But now every time she'd get up to go to the potty, before, I tried to get her not to use her bathroom because that's where the eave was hanging down and the tree was. So if I missed her, she'd be in there, but if I was able to point it out, I'd go, just go right here. But so every time she goes, oh my gosh, Theba, come in here. So every time it was a new experience, and the tree and the eave and everything. So that night it was dark, so she wouldn't see all that damage. But in the morning, I did not sleep, as I'm sure you did not, and hundreds of thousands of I don't know how many people didn't sleep, but a lot. I just laid there. I was calm. I was probably still in shock. Heck, I don't even
Shock
remember.
and probably like just a lot of things going through your mind.
Oh, I think one of the things that helped me rest was the contractor looked at the damage. I think he must have come inside, because that would have been smart. And he said we were safe to stay, because there were people going down our street with their luggage. So for me, I was like, and I could tell the people across the street were not going to be able to stay at their house. I was like, now this is one of those blessings in a trial where I don't have to find a hotel room, yank my mother out of this home.
So you could still keep some routine at home.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's another part of your house that has no damage. You know, the
Right.
important, the kitchen, and
Mm-hmm.
you can sit here in the den and it almost looks very normal. You can get...
Right, which is something that she doesn't like. But we could, since I felt safe about the roof, because there were the cracks, and he said the structure was fine. That morning we got up, and it was very important for me to find coffee. Someone dropped off some coffee. I was going to try to create some normalness, because the first thing I did when I got up, of course I didn't sleep. Cats slept with us. I said, hi, Mama, and she was still in bed. She goes, hi, honey. I said, I just need to remind you that we had a storm come through, and there's a lot of downed trees or felled trees, whatever they call it, etc. And she goes, oh, okay. And so I just want to remind you that things are going to look a little weird outside. And she goes, okay, well, I'm going to get up now. And of course she went to the potty. Oh my gosh, what on earth? And then she got up and walked around. Oh my! So everywhere she looked,
It was a new experience every time.
and let me tell you, that first week, it was a new experience every time. So my best friend came over the next day, because I needed her. And I knew that I was going to have to focus on other tree people and things and neighbors. And she sat with Mom, and and the activity was just something else. You know, people with chainsaws coming to help and free up our backyard a little bit. And Mom was totally into it. She was amazed by what she was seeing, but she was not rattled. Like, she wasn't like nervous. She loved having Beth over every time that she would see someone and talk to them, and there was just so much activity. Some of it was loud, but she handled it really well.
Because at that point, you were handling it better.
Yeah, I mean, and when I did cry, I had a lot of cries on that next day, because it was kind of all sinking in. I'd go off, and I would cry. And I felt comfortable because my best friend was with my mom, keeping her occupied. Because again, she doesn't like Theba crying. I'm not allowed to. So, so I was trying to make decisions, talk to my contractor. So much was happening in the neighborhood, as you can only imagine. And so we had 9 nights where we slept together in her room. Kat got with us, and she loved it. You know, that was all fun for her. And but we had 2 nights that got cold. People were dropping off generators for us, so we could have an extra generator to run a little floor heater in so we decided to sleep in my room that night because it was smaller and we could warm it up. So we did that. And so she was really good at taking my lead, and she would say that. She'd go, well, you're just in charge. You know, ultimately she knew.
It was like she knew. So
yeah, she
I
knew.
think that's amazing, and you bring out some good points that in the education part of knowing the disease is every time it was a new experience to her. So a lot of times when other things happen, and I try to educate people on, like, don't tell people that people died, because if you told them that they passed away, then it's a new experience to them every time. It's like they just found out. So being careful with the emotional information provided, because then now you have an experience of saying that this experience was a new experience to her every time.
Every morning, and then several times through the day.
Yes.
And so it gave us something to talk about. Now, she didn't ultimately get to see the size of the tree on the roof or the actual roof damage. I think to her, she just thought it was the eve and that we lost some trees. But when she would look out the window and see the neighbors, that was bad. Yeah. And she was like, we're so blessed to be able to stay in our house. So she knew that that was something, because the neighborhood was dark and other people were not able to stay in their house. So I stayed removed from it. I didn't wander off to go look at damage. First of all, I didn't want to leave my mother, and I didn't want to see any more damage. I could see the neighborhood across from this actual neighborhood that I'd never been able to see before because of trees, and I saw that it took a direct hit. So there was enough for me to just kind of stay in the moment here with her. We didn't need to wander around. It was so chaotic anyway. I didn't need to go anywhere. Really couldn't go anywhere. I could get out, but what's the point? People came and delivered stuff for us, and we got gas delivered for us. So it would not have been for her best interest for me to be separated from her anyway. So people helped us, for those obvious reasons.
So another lesson in this is, as we think about this, is Alzheimer's Arkansas. We are always talking about caring for the caregiver and the caregiver taking care of themselves. And I think this is a good example of why the caregiver has so much more stress than the person they're taking care of, because you have a reality of what's going on. So because you know that there's been a tornado, the trees have fallen, your house is damaged, what is something else, is it coming back through? You have all of these anxieties in your body, all of the stress, like, what does this mean next? Do we have to leave? She has none of those thoughts.
Right.
None. So as a caregiver, when we say, are you taking care of yourself? And a lot of times there's a number. The older you get, I won't say that, but research shows that the older you are, the more likely the person that's taking care of the person with Alzheimer's will pass away.
Right. You talk about that often.
Because they feel the stress. They have the thoughts, the anxiety of what's next, what's going on, when the person that's actually living with it does not have these capabilities.
She's just inconvenienced in new ways.
Yes. And you, as long as you were calm, she could recognize and mirror that, but that does not take away your internal stress and the things you feel, and you have to go away to cry. So that's why it's important for caregivers to take a good example to take care of themselves, because their perception of what's going on, even within themselves, is not the same as yours.
Right. And so I know I told you before you got here, I took advantage of, first of all, an already planned therapy session that was 2 days later or 3 days later. Again, I knew I needed to take care of myself, so I did not cancel it. A friend came over and hung out with Mom so I wouldn't leave her alone, because at that point too, even though I already had a contractor, a plan in motion, I'd be having an insurance guy come, etc., I didn't want anyone knocking on the door, and I had a sign on the door, and I certainly wasn't ever going to leave her alone to then just welcome somebody in the house or say yes to a repair job. I could go to that. In fact, I didn't drive. My best friend came and got me and drove me, because she knew I was still really rattled. I was, and she knew also that we were going to be passing by harder hit areas. And my physiological system was just all over the map, and I knew that. I was very conscious of that, especially when a big truck would come by and pound. I'd jump. If a friend moved his arm really fast, I'd jump. So I was going to allow that process to be real. Don't try to act like it's not happening. I didn't know how long it would last, but I was excited to go visit with my therapist, and then we scheduled 2 other appointments, kind of an emergency type setting in which I felt comfortable and good because my friend could keep coming back. So each week I would go and visit with her and just kind of track with her. And it was good too because I needed to get out of the house, even if it meant sitting with my therapist, who I adore. And something that I don't do well, we've talked about this on other podcasts, is ask for help. And I did.
You're almost required to at this point.
Yeah, but it's still weird feeling.
It is.
I mean, I knew we needed to have another generator for heat because we had one run in the fridge. There was a 3rd generator dropped off in case I wanted to vacuum because that's my therapy. And by then there had been so much traction in this house that's an area. It's not like a obsession, but it gives me comfort to vacuum, and especially because I have so much cat hair in this house.
I wash dishes.
Yeah, so I never used it, but it was there if I really needed some therapy to vacuum. So Mom was very calm, very good, in ways that, I was thinking about this the other day. I knew it would be disruptive, and I think ultimately, and again, this is where I have to trust God. If we did have to leave this house, He was going to give her the peace and the grace and the mercy to be as calm as possible in her Alzheimer's brain, and me as well. But we didn't. But there was also, I realized that's all she cared about. I knew there was going to be noise when they had to reconstruct or redo or build or whatever you call it. I'm trying to learn all these new
remodel
terms. Well, they had to tear off part of the roof, and
you're not quite done at all.
Yeah, and so that was going to be noisy. So for her, she was like, "What is that?" And I would say, since she never saw the roof, because it was always covered with tarps, I did take her out one day and say, "Well, come on out, Mama, now that the tarps are gone and they tore off the roof, I want to show you where." And she was, "Oh my God, we got that much damage." And then I had to take her around to my neighbor's house, and we just cut through her downed fence and stood there because we could see better, because it was 2 gables and an eave. Oh my gosh. So that was always so funny. So I wanted her to be part of the process. I knew she could handle it. It's not like I thought she was going to fall apart, but she was like, "Well, oh, look at this rock. Isn't that the prettiest rock?" So we go from damage to a rock. So she was shocked by it, but it didn't emotionally affect her. Isn't that weird? Because then all of a sudden she's picking up her favorite rocks, because there's many more of them all of a sudden that have materialized. So that would throw me. And then she'd go, "Where are the babies?" So she'd be really focused. And then there were lots of people, so that was entertaining to her. And she would meet them for the first time, hug everybody, tell everyone that she loved them. So lots and lots. We went through the lemonade, the tea, because if I did not try to control her, meaning I would keep her out of harm's way when they were building, but she needed to connect with strangers out that were doing stuff on the yard. So she'd go, "Do you want some lemonade?" And so they fell in love with her. And so I wouldn't boss her around. The only time I would get anxious and kind of more authoritative, and as she would call it, bossy, is when she would walk out from underneath the eave or in any way get anywhere near anything where I had concerns. Yeah. So now she's just kind of used to it. I think you saw for the first time, you came yesterday, they finally finished off getting I guess it was 10 feet tall of debris in our front yard, so she never really could see the other house in front of us. So that was a new experience. So now we've talked about that house and the damage on that house for 2 days. So yeah, it's all new. What I like hearing Carolyn is that she is going, all right, well, you take care of it. She's released that. Now that we're talking about a woman who's been a control freak all her life. And so she handles everything. Crosses those T's, dots those I's, makes every decision about this house. And she's trusting me to do it. And more than just trust, she's just letting it happen and is fine, you know. And so, you know, I've been taking care of the finances for several years now, but this is a big deal. So she knows you said you parked by our new
shingles and roofs. Yeah.
So she's not questioning, did we get the right ones? Now she may say that, but it's just something to say. But she's more like, look at that truck. She is amazed by the trucks and the cranes and everything else. But I heard her say, anyone who came up, the new gutter guy came up yesterday to show me a sample. And I just told them both. I was like, my mom has Alzheimer's, so she'll probably invite you in for lunch. But, you know, I was being silly, but just giving them a heads up. So they showed her the sample. And she goes, I like it. Like that. And she goes, but she's in charge. And they came down and said, your mom said she liked it. And I was like, well, good. So including her in things that she's really not interested in, but wants to be active. And I mean,
so it gives her purpose.
Yeah, when you got here, she was sitting on the porch, could barely get up because she wanted to continue to get debris out of the deck.
So a lot of amazing things for you to see how the disease kind of works. But it's kind of unexplainable, but amazing at the same time.
Yeah, you know, I showed Carolyn some additional damage that I'm not the only one who experienced. I think it was last Thursday we had a torrential downpour, like 6 inches in an ungodly amount of time. And it was hard. And we weren't quite ready for that. We were ready maybe for a nice rain because they had put some stuff down, but we hadn't gotten our shingles yet. They had rebuilt and they did what's called the dry-in. But, you know, I heard down from the neighbors, same thing happened to them. You discover some weaknesses.
Yes.
And so this goes back to what you said, feeding off the emotion. I knew that we were having some water issues in my ceiling, which surprised me, but didn't surprise me, because that's where the damage was. But when I was running around like a crazy woman getting tarps and buckets, there was water coming in the guest room light fixture. And so for that moment, I lost it, you know, in that panic, angry, frustrated, shocked way. And I'm sure that I rattled off the same cuss words and I had the same energy. So she started crying because she didn't know what was happening. Because that's how I was that night during the tornado. Just that, you know, that emotion coming out. It's like, oh, Mama, I'm sorry. And I knew right then she's only crying because I'm upset.
Because you're upset.
She has really no concept that there is water coming in the guest room at this point. And so she just knows I keep telling her to go ahead and go lay down and I'll be sleeping with her again that night because I'd already gone back to my bedroom. But she was like, okay. But she was rattled because she knew something else dramatic had happened and that men were coming to the house to do some emergency tarp. So I just wanted her to just being conscious of that. And again, I didn't want my mama to cry because I was upset. Plus, you know, I didn't have time to be in any kind of angry self-pity mode. I had to act fast. So what I did do is I included her in getting, have you ever tried to unwrap a new tarp?
Yes.
Okay. And it's ginormous. I didn't know. I just thought, oh great, we have tarps. They dropped off. And I had a bucket and I didn't know if the ceiling would come down. So I just, Mama, help me with these tarps. And normally she was real calm and trying to help me. And normally I would get anxious and more impatient because things aren't working out right and they need to happen fast. And I stayed real calm about it. And that was surprising. In fact, when we went to go tarp the guest room, I said, let's go ahead and cover the bed and the dressers, the side tables. She goes, well, and she's moving in slow motion.
Okay.
And it's okay because she doesn't know not to move in slow motion. But I'm having to dial it back because slow motion ain't going to work for this situation, but my temper is not going to work either. So I was like, you know what, Mom, you're right. That is a good idea. Let's take these lamps off. And I'm telling you, she was in slow. I'm going to go take it over here. I was like, here, let me have it, Mom. I can go. I don't want you to trip over that cord. And I was like running down the hall with it. We got it tarped, and I thanked her over and over. Thank you, Mama. That tarp was so hard. Thank you. But if that ceiling decides to go, at least we'll have some protection over our furniture, etc. So thankfully, God's provision and timing, those two men showed up during that torrential rainstorm and lightning. I had an extra tarp, and I said, I've got a tarp. And they were like, I'll take the tarp, because they're roofers, so they just have the stuff that goes under. And they saved the day. So yes, we have to replace some ceilings, more of the ceilings, but I went back in there with Mom. I said, well, looks like I'm sleeping with you tonight. Well, good. You know, it was all like a little fun activity. So that means the cats are going to come in. And she was like, oh, that'll be fun. And then in the morning, I had to remind her, now, Mama, we had a storm last night. Wasn't tornadic or anything like that, but there's rain got in the house. Huh? Okay, well, just a minute. Let me come in there and look. Oh my gosh! And then, of course, you know, when she walks in a room, Alzheimer's patients, as well as just the elderly, they tend to focus down and not look up. So she's walking in, and not until I immediately, okay, this is another thing I did. So knowing that we're going to have to adjust to something different, I got up real early and I said, Mom, I'm going to go make coffee. You don't need to get up yet. I'll come and get you. I wanted to get all by myself, and I handled it. The tarp out of my room, get it out of there, and I took it to the garage, pushed the bed back a little bit, because by this time we have a floating bed, meaning we're just moving it all over, because that's where we have coffee. That's where she watches the action out the front window. So I knew we weren't going to have any other issues, because by then my contractor was coming that morning to re-tarp and double tarp. And so even though she really doesn't have an eye for it, we have the mattresses up, but I kind of shut the door to the other room. So it wasn't until I have a retractable bed, so we were kind of laid back. We still don't have TV at this point. Still don't, even today, but she laid back. She goes, oh my gosh, that stain is getting worse. So she thought it was from the original storm. Yes. And I was like, well, that's just terrible. Well, look over there, you know, so it was cute. So again, something to talk about, be involved about. And then all is well with her as long as we're having coffee and we can be in that room and the cats are up there.
So good for her and good for you. And I think a lot of good information for you to be able to actually, in a time of crisis, see how, in one way, the disease kind of worked.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And the importance of what we preach about, what I love to preach about, of taking care of yourself, because your mother is way less stressed than you are.
Absolutely.
So even in
and
the
really
disease,
always has been, you know,
but still in the disease, still stressed.
You know, also what's weird, I don't think weird, it's expected when you go through a trauma like that. And you know, there was a moment that I thought we were going to go be with the Lord, and I thought, well, great, we're going together. So it's probably the first time I've ever faced a moment where there was the probability of either death or severe injury. And so all of a sudden as my therapist said, I was shook in a way that on a spiritual level that was very important and needed. So really for the last 3 weeks, I've been in a totally different phase of movement, of thought, of thinking, of my Heavenly Father. And so normally when we have to deal with people, now it doesn't mean it doesn't tire me out. I've definitely gotten tired when people come to the house and work, but I'm in a different place of calm than I've ever been, and I don't see that changing. I think it is a spiritual shift that happens if you allow it. And so I just don't, it's kind of like, I thought it was interesting, and maybe not so much for you, but I thought you might notice that I was completely set up for the podcast.
Yes, you were.
And I didn't have a nervous energy
You
that
did
I
not.
normally do, or I end up making something like worse. I'll move the microphone, and then the thing will come off. And
But I
thing.
thought you were ready because we have something to do faster. So, like in my mind, it was like, okay, we're at an earlier time and we have things to do. So
No, we ended up starting at the time we normally do anyway. But no, not at all. There's something that has shifted in me where even setting up for podcasts is not making... Look, we started this podcast, and for those who are listening to us, I also try to have a YouTube version of it. Well, I forgot to hit the record button on the video. And it already came disconnected again anyway. And I just looked down and was like, I never hit record. And I didn't care. I was like, no biggie. We'll use it as a highlight. Yes, ma'am? She'll come in here. But yeah, it's just different. Everything's different. Like, well, so? Like, when you realize that things could end like that. And, I don't care about curb appeal. That's not why I wanted those trees gone. For me personally, those trees, I was taking it personally. Those are the trees that damaged my house. I wanted them gone. If we never grow grass back for a whole year, I don't care.
Yeah.
Everything's changed. And I'm very comfortable with the change. And I think that God is through this trial preparing me for the thing that you and I talk about with my mother.
Yes.
And I do not think that I'm going to handle it as dramatically as I thought. Meaning that I just feel like if you can survive a tornado, and I don't know, I feel like I can survive that, the loss of my mom one day. I'm not saying it wouldn't be difficult. Of course it's going to be difficult, but I don't know. It's hard. We'll be talking about this, I'm sure.
And he provides peace
and
after
grace.
the storm.
Yeah.
Even when it's still chaotic.
Yeah.
You can find peace.
Yeah, it puts things, and you hear people talk about near-death experiences or the loss of a family member or whatever. They got cancer and they survived cancer or whatever, but it changes their perspective. You hear people talk about that, and you wonder what you would do. And now I do after this particular. I know an aspect of that, and I'm grateful for it because I need it personally, and she needs it. And she will certainly need a less anxious Theba when things start going a little bit darker for her.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing your experience. And I hate to say experience because although it was that part, you still have a lot of things to go through and getting your home and at least back to where it was. So
yeah, well, thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, and I say that because when we had the unexpected deluge of rain that decided to creep into the house in an unexpected way, even though I had a moment of like panic and anger and frustration, I still handled that differently than I would have. on a bunch of different levels, even with the workers and the people. We were working as a team, and I remember I was just running through the house going, but you're a vessel of Jesus. Come on now, you're a vessel of Jesus. Let him lead you. Go get that bucket. Go do that. Get the tarps. No time at that moment for self-pity or I'm a victim or being upset that something didn't happen a certain way or how did this happen in the first place. It wasn't about that. I was in the moment unlike anything I'd ever been before, and then continued to be, even in dealing with it the day after. So it's fascinating. But yep,
you've done it strong. So just a reminder, I work for Alzheimer's Arkansas, and to remind caregivers out that's listening to us to take care of yourself always. Remember that your loved one emotions, they're going to mirror your emotions. And we're still human, and as you can hear with Theba, as much as she tried, we're going to have those emotional moments. So another good thing is the reset for your loved ones. They're not going to remember. And you being able to walk away, get yourself together, and come back in a different emotional state, they will respond to the different emotional state. So,
and lean on your friends.
And lean on, and I say this all the time, know who your support is and know that they are there, and use them. Allow them to bless you, allow them to use their purpose, because sometimes we're hindering people, if you kind of think about that, hindering. So if you need support, you can call Alzheimer's Arkansas. I know it's still a difficult time. We do have grant funding available for respite care, because I know there's probably
it's a renewal for me.
Yeah, so if you need some respite, please apply. We do have funding, and we do have a family assistant program grant, which is $350, but you can use that for just about anything. So if someone's listening and they need food or a bill paid or just some kind of assistance, please reach out to us.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for listening, everyone.
Thank you.